how to develop measurable student learning outcomes and assessment based on those outcomes. In this video, I will explain the method for developing student learning outcomes based on described on this book here, Connecting the Dots, Developing Students' Learning Outcomes. This book explains very simple three-stage method of developing student learning outcomes. In stage one, we need to set some high-level goals for the courses, the goals that we want to accomplish through that particular course. And then under each goal, it also suggests to have some general learning outcomes. And then under each of those general learning outcomes, very specific measurable learning outcomes that can be assessed. So step number one, in stage one, we see very high level general goals. And then verbs such as understand, which is very broad and wide, we can use to set those goals. For example, understand, let's say we are doing automotive engineering, one of the automotive engineering course, understand the brake system, understand the engines, understand the transmissions, things like that. And then in the second step of that student learning outcome development process is the setting some general learning outcome goals. What are the general learning outcomes under the brake system? And then in the final stage, to have some specific measurable learning outcomes, preferably following the Bloom's taxonomy verb list. If you're not familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy, please watch the earlier video that I have uploaded on that, can be found in the openeducator.com. So this is an example from that book on this three-stage process. As you can see here, the word understand, which is very broad, it cannot be directly measured. It's not directly measurable. It's a very broad. Let's say understand the world, understand car. To what extent students understand the world? So it's very broad, but you can see that in this example from the book, it uses the word understand to have a very broad, big ideas, both for the goal level as well as the general learning outcome levels. For example, you can see this general learning outcomes under goal 2 uses that word understand. It's okay to use that. However, if you look at the specific, if you look at the third stage of the outcome development, it uses all direct action verbs from Bloom's taxonomy, something that can directly be measured. So I will explain using one of my course how we can step by step develop measurable learning outcomes. So this is an example where I started my first college level course. We usually given a textbook, maybe the previous professor used a textbook, it has some chapters. Assume that we want to cover the 11 chapters and also some labs with that course as well, and then when it's going to be covered. So this is our typical traditional syllabus, which has nothing to do with what exactly this automotive engineering program needs, why the students are enrolled in the first place, to what extent we are contributing to their final goal. So these are not clarified in the traditional approach. Now, this particular book talks about this detailed step-by-step process, which I will explain now, how we can develop measurable learning outcomes. So step number 1, it says, okay, you have these topics that we use in our traditional syllabi, and then we also know when they will be covered. So in the step number 1, it suggests that have some general learning outcome goals. What do you want to accomplish from chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and so on? Have some of these goal statement there. And then also do some clarification in the goals, to what extent they're going to be achieved using Bloom's taxonomy verbs, action, verb list in this clarifying statement. So this is for my first 6 chapters, and then the last 6 topics on this. And then it says in step 2, switch the goal with the main topics. So as you can see here, previously we have the main topics in the first column, and then the goal statement developed from them. Now we kind of switch them backwards. So first the goal and then the main topics. Now when I switch them, I kind of deviated a little bit from the book, where it has a direct switch from the goal statement to the main topics, where in the goal statement now, I checked the external accreditor for engineering programs, ABET, which is the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, and they ask us to fulfill these 7 learning outcomes. We have to make sure that a student gets these 7 learning outcomes by the time they graduate. So just reading them and see, yeah, I kind of cover that one, cover this one. I cover also some teamwork. They work in a lab. Also they do some lab work, which is the experimentation. So that's learning outcome number 6. And also we want all of our students to transfer knowledge. So I cover basically almost 5 of these. So then I listed that 5 learning outcomes that Accreditation Board for Engineering Technology learning outcome 1, 3, 5, 6, and 7. So these are the things I actually do in my classes. Now my goal number 1, which is basically understanding the basic, is not really connected to that, but however, without the basic they can't really move on to the next section. And then I have also listed some topics that basically discuss each of my goals from this course. I have a question mark on the teamwork, because even though they work in a team for all the labs, but I don't recall I have actually assessed their team working ability. Of course, I kind of try to sometime randomly sort. I try to balance the team with different ethnicities, male, female, domestic, international, things like that. But they do learn some, but I really don't have an assessment tools for that. So, and I did not have that in my syllabus. So these are the main topics and goal statement. And in the third step, where I have the developed goals, general learning outcome under each of these goals, and specific learning outcomes, I will upload these documents in the openeducator.com for your reference if you want to use as an example for your courses. Now look at this first goal statement: understand the fluid power system, which is very broad. And then under that I have 5 general learning outcome, again broad: understand the unit system. And then under this broader unit system understanding, I have 4 specific measurable learning outcomes. They are developed using Bloom's action verb. Define: can they define what is US customary unit system? Can they define English system? Can they distinguish between the US customary, imperial, English, standard, SI unit system? Can they convert one unit to other? And of course they have to know for both system, pneumatic and hydraulic system. So I have these very clearly written learning outcomes, and each of these I can assess in my class, because that's my main goal. The only way I can improve my teaching and learning if I assess. If the learning outcomes are not measurable, then basically I'm probably wasting their time, not at least documenting in a way that is helpful for me to develop and improve learning. And then I have also developed for all goals. So if you look at this number 2, which is directly copied from the ABET learning outcome 1, my external accreditation board, And then under each of these, some general goals and specific learning outcomes. And under these specific learning outcomes, I have very specific. I can they calculate the friction loss? So if they can they calculate velocity? I can see in their exam paper whether they can do it or not. And then again, so here is one thing under this category 5, use of software, which is one of the communication skills that engineer needs is the technical communication skills. I don't have any learning outcomes for that, but they do learn these and they are assessed, so I probably can have another learning outcome on that, technical communication skills. So I hope this helped. To summarize, you set some big goals, and under each of these big goals you set some general learning outcomes, and then under each of these general learning outcomes some very specific learning outcomes that is measurable, because if we don't measure, if we don't assess, there is no way we can find weaknesses and strength, and there is no question of improvement if we don't have that established.